It's the GTN show from sunny Lanzarote. Welcome. This week, we saw an apology from the PTO after their athletes voted to reduce their entry fees. And it's got us asking, is triathlon too expensive to enter?
Yeah, we've also seen some exciting announcements from some pros, as well as some bad news from some other pros. And we spotted a popular running shoe brand on the feet of some Winter Olympians.
Yeah, well, I reckon it's time to crack on before we get too tempted to jump in that pool.
All right, starting off with some of the stuff we've noticed over the internet over the last few days. Starting with this, the BBC reporting that there's going to be esports at the Commonwealth Games this year, which is interesting because there's already going to be the Arena Games this year with the triathlon going into the esports world, but this is proper esports, like gaming. They're going to be held for over 2 days during the Commonwealth Games in the Convention Centre in Birmingham, and it's kind of a trial event to see how esports can be incorporated into these big games such as the Olympic Games, I suppose, in future.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff, isn't it? But it's interesting to see that apparently in the next decade or so, I mean, obviously we know sport's changing, but those cities that are actually bidding to host are only going to have to offer the essential sports, which apparently are going to be swimming and athletics, which I guess in a way does kind of sound good for triathlon because it's 2/3 of our sport. But yeah, interesting stuff. Next, we have spotted Javier Gomez doing a little bit more testing. We know he's now moved to Orbea and he's getting his TT position dialed in. Well, he's been working on that position over in the velodrome.
Yeah, some interesting shots there. We'll see him on the long courses this year, so we'll see what he can do there. Also, Cassandra Brigand is back on track, literally. She ran a 9:02 for a 3,000 metre on the track the other day, which is pretty impressive running form early on in the season. Hopefully we'll see her back on the triathlon racetrack and showing that run speed in a race soon.
Yeah, some speedy stuff. Well, some not good news for poor Indy Lee. Although her news did actually break it onto the BBC News. She was travelling out to, I don't know if it was a training or a racing event, but with her bike in one of those softer bike bags. And sadly, the airline managed to not just slightly dent it, but completely tear through the frame. And if you look at these photos, it's a little incomprehensible of quite how damaged it is. But I did see a shot of her going, she's got a new bike. I think she's had some insurance payout and it's in a bike box this time.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal when you open your bike bag and you see that kind of damage.
Oh, gutting.
Yeah, absolutely gutting. Also, some more bad news from a pro, and that's Nicola Spirig. She had a bike accident. She's broken her collarbone and 2 ribs, and she had a punctured lung. So she had a surgery almost immediately. She looked like she'll be out of action for at least 6 weeks. She says that definitely means that Ironman 70.3 Dubai, which was her plan, is out of the window, of course. But she feels like she's still on track for a sub-8 attempt later in the year. I'm sure we'll see Nicola come back strong. She's done it many times before. She's evergreen. Yeah,
she's a pretty resilient athlete, isn't she? Well, it seems like triathletes need to be resilient. This is the last bit of bad news, promise. But Tamara Jewett has also had a bad crash. In actual fact, she didn't even know where she was when she woke up in hospital. So turns out she was hit by a car, although she's thanked her physios, and it sounds like, there is a path to recovery that's set in place and in action.
Yeah, glad to hear it. On to some better news, much better news, actually, and that is Katie Zaferis is expecting a baby in July. Yeah, she's 20 weeks pregnant. She announced on social media the other day with a little photo of the ultrasound. So congratulations to her and husband Tommy Zaferis.
Yeah, that's lovely news. Well, some also really nice heartwarming news. It's come from the Winter Olympics. The winner of the 15K cross-country race from Finland stayed until the end of the race to congratulate the last place finisher. And it seems to have hit the news everywhere. And I just think it's so nice when we get those good news stories and it just shows that sport is more than just winning.
Yeah, that's heartwarming to see. Something you see at Ironmans where the winner waits for the final finisher, although Ironman winners got to wait a lot longer for the final finisher than a 15K ski race. Anyway, one more piece of good news, and that is Richard Murray has returned to racing. As you may have known, he had a heart condition which forced him to pull out of the Olympic Games last year. So he was... Well, we were all wondering whether he'd ever be able to return to racing. Well, he has. He won the Blue Lagoon sprint distance triathlon in South Africa this weekend. So hopefully we'll see him back on the big stage soon.
Right, Right, well, to open up Tri News, we wanted to look at the entry fees and the cost of them after this quite surprise announcement from the PTO. Well, it was a public apology in a sense, and they have reduced their entry fee for their PTO Tour races by 50%, which is pretty dramatic. And they have been really open about it. They said they listened to the pros who were all part of the PTO and realised that actually not that many people were jumping at these entry fees. I think it's $399 for the 100k distance for their races, and I think it's made them realise that they're not yet a big enough brand to call that money and realise that they are having to build up from the bottom, a bit like an athlete would who's coming new into the sport. And it's quite interesting to see the honesty behind it. I appreciate that.
Yeah, it was quite a humble apology by the CEO Sam Renouf of the PTO. He basically said, if you don't know, what they're doing is they're bringing in age group racing to their PTO Tour that's starting this year. Obviously, it's a big money race for the pros, but they're also now introducing age group racing, and they'd open up the entries. But the entries and the immediate response from the general public, from you guys out there, was, whoa, was it so expensive?
Or was it just no entries?
Well, yeah, or maybe there was no, maybe you voted with your clicks by not actually entering. But the point is that they saw that clearly this was too expensive. They took it back to their board. All the athletes, the pros who were on their board, unanimously agreed we need to drop these entry fees. And like you say, a very humble apology by the CEO saying, well, we haven't proved that we can provide you with a great race experience, so how can we assume we can charge you $399 for this race experience? We can't. So what we're going to do is halve it. So they've halved it, literally half the fee for this first year, so they can prove to everybody that they can put on a good race. It remains to be seen whether they can, or obviously we hope they can, but yeah, very humble from them to walk it back like that. It is interesting because they did say that they compared it to the market average and what people are paying for, say, an Ironman 70.3, and their fee was already way below that for good reason, because they feel like they're already too expensive. So they were trying to do it as cheap as possible, but still, everyone was like, still too expensive. And for reference, the average entry fee for an Ironman in North America is $777, whereas this, for obviously a middle distance race, so a shorter race, was $399 originally, and now it's half that, $200. So a very good deal now.
It'll be interesting to see, won't it, if the entry fees or the entries start flooding in, and they need the entries to make it a good event. So hopefully, if they do get a huge amount of participants, it can then grow, because I don't know if they're going to be making a loss at that fee, because it is, compared to other races, quite low. And you have to think, well, what are the costs of putting on a triathlon? These companies are trying to make some sort of profit, but they're also trying to keep the sport of triathlon going and getting us, passing with our precious pennies to do these events. And it's the fact of having to, water safety to start with is a huge factor, obviously closing the roads. And it's things I think as athletes, we often just take for granted that, we're used to paying sort of £20 or £50 for a running race. Why is triathlon so expensive?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting discussion, because perhaps it's the whole business model of triathlon that needs to be shaken up a little bit, because the business model at the moment is very much that they get their money from entry fees, and maybe you could switch it, improve the TV coverage, get your money from sponsorships, get your money from TV rights, that kind of thing. And I think that's what PTO is trying to do, but they've got a long road ahead of them, I think, to do that. And I think they've realized right now that they've got a lot of proving to do before they can, change the whole makeup of the whole world of triathlon. It's not really for us to say whether triathlons are too expensive or not too expensive. That's very much for the consumer out there, you guys, to say how expensive they are. So what do you think? Are all triathlons too expensive? Has it just gotten out of hand and the race directors are just trying to make more and more money out of you by squeezing the money out of you because you have to pay this money if you want to do a decent triathlon? Or are they quite reasonable for what you actually get for your money at the end of the day? Well, leave your answers in the comment section below and start that discussion.
Well, whilst we're talking about triathlons and events, there's been a new event announced for Wales within the UK. It's actually a challenge event. So Challenge Wales is taking over from the Wales Triathlon, which is in the beautiful bay of Fishguard. Apparently a very sheltered swim and a beautiful bike ride. Now, I've only been over to Pembrokeshire a couple of times, and I do know it is beautiful when the sun is shining.
I've never been there. So that event happening on the 18th of June. So yeah, I guess entries are open now. So get your entry in if you're interested in racing there. Maybe we'll head over. It's not too far from our offices in Bath.
It's
Maybe we
very
should go over
pretty.
and see in June. Also, this week, triathlon stars all gathered for a very glitzy premiere in London, which you don't really see very often in triathlon, do you?
It's quite nice to see triathletes out of lycra.
All dressed up in their dressed to the nines. Yeah, it was the premiere of Every Second Counts, a production by Super League Triathlon, pretty much following the triathletes. So that's a 4-episode series, and the first episode premiered yesterday on their YouTube channel. So we haven't seen it at the time of filming.
No, I'm quite looking forward to it.
We're going to check that out, and hopefully it'll be as great as the glitzy premiere made it look.
Yeah, well, that was the Golden Quartet that is out. They've got the Travelling Circus, the future of triathlon, and all to play for. And I must admit, I've quite enjoyed their sort of fairly short YouTube videos, so I'm looking forward to seeing that.
The same quality. Yeah. Also, some news from the world of triathlon. We mentioned Javier Gomez has been in the velodrome earlier and testing for his long course. Well, he's not just testing new bikes for his long course career, he's also changed coaches. He's got a new coach, and that is Dan Plews, who you may have heard of. He was actually the head coach for the Zwift Triathlon Academy, which I did recently, and I actually interviewed him for that. He's also previous coach of Terenzo Bazone, Jan van Berkel, and various other pros. Javier Gomez has taken him on to steer the ship, as it were, for his long course career, which we hope to see kicking off in earnest this year.
He seems like he's making a lot of changes. New bikes partner, new coach. It's going to be really interesting to see what he can produce. All right, Mark's not here, but it is What the Tech. And I'm sure he'll be very proud that we are sticking with this, even though we've only got one piece of news this week. And it's actually something we've spotted from the Winter Olympics. Yes, quite a few athletes have been wearing a iteration of the On Spike. And I kind of find it's quite interesting because we haven't yet seen an official release of a Spike from On. We've seen little glimpses of some of their athletes wearing them on the track. So soon, hopefully they'll be coming out properly. But it's quite interesting to see that actually they're really almost promoting them or seeing them more readily available on the winter, on the ice.
Yeah, it is interesting to see a brand branching out to a whole new genre for them. Obviously, I don't think many of us triathletes are going to be wearing these winter spikes or any sprint spikes.
You're not going to be sprinting down the bobsleigh track.
Well, I might give it a go one day, but I've literally never tried anything like that. In fact, I've never tried any winter sports at all.
Do you know there's a bobsleigh track in Bath?
Is there?
I mean, the push track. You're not going to get much ice.
I haven't tried any winter sports at all, and probably be a long time before I do. So anyway, it's pretty interesting to see On branching out into new avenues. There's shoes that a lot of triathletes are wearing. Okay, on to your race news, and not so much races happening at this time of year in triathlon, some down in the southern hemisphere, but the pro racing really hasn't kicked off yet. We did have Ultraman Florida happening this past weekend, which is, if you don't know, a very extreme version of an Ironman, I guess. It's a 3-day event. The first day you swim 6.2 miles, I think bike 90 miles. The second day you bike 171 miles, I think it might be. And then the third day you run 52 miles. So essentially it's a double, nearly triple Ironman done over 3 days. Pretty extreme. The winner there was Jeff Fejfar, and the women's winner was Antonina Reznikov. Interesting, Antonina Reznikov was second overall.
Yeah.
She had a solid day out.
It just shows, doesn't it, how, when the distances get longer, that gap gets closer between. Well, talking of extreme events, there was a marathon and half marathon, in fact, in Antarctica on King George Island in the South Shetland Islands. This actually had 144 runners from 17 different countries, which I was quite amazed about, that many people travelled down there. The winner was Ryan Beberus in a 3:58, and the women's winner, Ember Verma, in a 4:22.
Yeah, they haven't been able to have this event for a couple of years because of the pandemic, and obviously travelling anywhere was hard, especially Antarctica. The reason this is a special event, though, is because it's pretty much your only option to do 7 marathons on 7 continents, because you want to tick off that 7th one, you've got to do one in Antarctica, and this is your only option.
Yeah, I can't imagine there's many options down there.
No.
Now, we mentioned racing happening down in the southern hemisphere. Well, sadly, New Zealand is being hit quite badly by the pandemic at the moment, and lots of their races have been cancelled. And we've just heard the announcement that Ironman New Zealand, which was due for the 5th of March, has now been cancelled. And one of those athletes who was really targeting that was Braden Curie. But he didn't let it stop him. He quickly had a look at the race calendar and found that the Kathmandu coast to coast was just in 36 hours' time.
Yeah, and this is something where his endurance career actually started. So 36 hours later, he did a little pivot and thought, well, if I'm not doing Ironman New Zealand in a couple of weeks, I can do this race. So he entered it and he won it. he said he had a great experience and it was great to go back to where it all began for him, because that's where his endurance career did begin. He actually said he had a funny little anecdote from the middle, because he was running through a forest somewhere and he ran over a route. And he remembered that route because it was the route that tripped up his brother, Glenn Curry, when they were running it a few years ago and pretty much ended his race. And he remembered the exact route. So he had a good chuckle halfway through his race. He went on to win the Kathmandu coast to coast this time, as you do when you've just prepared for it for 36 hours.
I mean, if you're 2 weeks out from Ironman, you probably haven't really started in the main bit of taper. You could be pretty fatigued as well.
Exactly, you'd be pretty fatigued. He also, apparently he was pretty fit, but he had no chance to go over the course or anything. I barely had enough time to repair the equipment you need for such a big endeavour, so well done to him.
Well, sticking with New Zealand, we mentioned that Challenge Wanaka had already been cancelled. Well, they've come up with a sort of bit of a plan B, and they're taking it virtually online with Ruby. In actual fact, yesterday, Hayden Wild led a sort of social group ride around the course of beautiful Wanaka. So now you can do it from the comfort of your own home. And the race is actually taking place this Saturday coming as due for the original event. And I think Hayden Wild's going to be competing again, so you can race alongside him, and the entry is free.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll be there end of all these virtual races rather than real races.
Yeah.
Not that there's anything wrong with virtual races, but we'd rather see them alongside real races rather than replacing real races. Anyway, talking about new races on the calendar, in Sunderland, this is very local news for the UK. Sunderland will host the British Triathlon Super Series Grand Final in August 2022. And while this may be news for the rest of the world, is that this is a bit of a test event for potentially Sunderland hosting the WTCS series in 2023. The thing is that Leeds may no longer host it. Their contract to host the WTCS series, which they have hosted the last few years, is up in 2023, and perhaps Sunderland could be putting their hand up as a potential venue for that. It remains to be seen. But anyway, Sunderland will be hosting the British Triathlon Super Series Grand Final in August in 2022. And now it's time for the Caption Competition. And last week we had this photo of someone, I don't know what he's doing, levitating on his skis. I don't know anything about, as I mentioned earlier, I know nothing about winter sports, so I don't know what he's doing or how he happened to be floating above the snow in his skis. I really don't know. But anyway, let's get on to your captions. Gary Weiss said, caption, is that a spider?
That might be me. I like that one. Thomas K. Now it's time for What the Tech. These are brand new skis spotted at the Winter Triathlon World Championships. They have ceramic bearings and an optimized zero contact technology to minimize friction. Looks impressive. What the tech?
Do skis have bearings? Like I said, I know nothing about winter sports. Anyway, Savage Pro says, Winter Triathlon looks kinda weird. See what he did there?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
but our winner, our favourite this week, winner of the cap is E. Foley. Coach said I was just a hop, skeep, and a jump away from a gold medal. Well done. Yeah, I like that one. Well done, E. Foley. Get in touch and we will make sure we get a GTN cap sent out to you. And this week we're in warmer climes for our caption photo. Well, it's James looking slightly greedy.
I wasn't being greedy. I got 3 ice creams for my 3 kids. It was only afterwards that I realised you can't take ice cream back to the UK. Anyway, those didn't go to waste, so...
Yeah, well, it's lucky you work with 3 kids, isn't it?
Exactly. Anyway, if you have a funny story or caption for that picture, leave it in the comments down below and you could win a cap next week. This week on the channel, we have a couple videos you might want to watch. How to train for an Ironman 70.3 and also things we wish we knew before we did our first triathlon. Yeah,
well, hopefully you've enjoyed today's show and the sunny Lanzarote. Well, the sun has come out now. Give us a like and remember to click that globe and subscribe. And as we have been out in warmer climates, you'll see more of our lovely new GTN cycle kit. So don't forget to check out the shop if you like the look of that. And there's a couple of videos that you might want to take a look at now. Running versus jogging. James poses the question, what's the difference there? Check that one out. Or how to swim further without getting tired.